Here I have the pieces for my side panels arranged in the final orientation. I'm just going to use the clamping elements to clamp these guys in place, and then I can solidly mark off my layout lines so I can domino it. Before I cut the groove to house the center panel, I'll cut the domino joints. I'm cutting a double domino joint, so I'm going to cut one domino joint closer to the top and one closer to the bottom. And this is spaced according to what Festool specifies in the manual. Now I'm going to use an 8mm domino here. Using this height, I'm going to cut all my top dominoes first, and then I'll reset the fence height and cut the bottom. I line up the line on the domino fence up to the layout lines that I had earlier on my workpiece, and I put all the weight on this handle in here. And then I'll make my plunge cut. With the first mortise cut, what I'm going to do now is lower the fence 16mm to get to the second mortise. I'll still reference the same layout line. That hasn't changed. And I'll make the second mortise at the lowered fence. Dry fitting it here, making sure everything lines up correctly. Looks good. I've done a dry fit here and everything looks good, so I'm gonna have to go ahead and start routing the groove that'll house this center plywood panel. Now, since the plywood is an undersized 1/2-inch piece of ply, I can't use a actual 1/2-inch bit, so I'll have to use a 3/8-inch bit and make 2 passes. So I'll take this apart and then go over to the CMS and we'll route the grooves. I've got the OF1400 router installed in the CMS table. I'll raise up the collet all the way because I'm going to do this bit change above the table, and I'll pop in the 3/8-inch straight bit. And then with the spindle lock depressed, I can tighten this guy down. The ratcheting mechanism makes it really easy to chuck that bit in there. Now, alternately, I can also turn the router table upside down, and I can change the bit, the router right side up. Now I'll lower this guy back down, and then I'll set the bit height. Pop this zero clearance insert in there. With my square set to 9mm, I'm going to raise the bit with this crank until it arrives just under the square. And that's it. So now that I've got the bit chucked up, I can set the distance between the end of the bit and the fence here. Now keep in mind that whenever setting anything on the router table, make sure the router is not plugged in for safety. So what I'm doing now is setting the distance to the fence to the closest end of the bit to the fence. So that's going to set the reveal of the plywood panel. So I want to set it back about 1/2 inch, so I'm going to set it to 12.5 millimeters, right around there. It's not critical. So I'll adjust the knobs on the fence and then push the fence back and then lock it in place when I have that measurement down. And because router bits are round, it doesn't really matter if the fence is parallel to the lines on the table. But in this case, since I'm going to offset the bit later on, it's going to be helpful for me to have the same, be on the same index on both sides, so I can move the fence back in equal increments. So as you can see here, I'm going to have to cut a stopped groove, and the groove is going to have to stop here on the inside corners of the longer framing members. So I'm going to mark this off so I know where to stop my groove on the router table. Using my actual stock, I'm going to set this feather board up. Just put gentle pressure on it and tighten down the knob. And the same thing goes for this guy up here. I just want it to be right on the top of my stock. And then I'll lock that down. And I'll check it by pushing the stock through a couple times. And then make a little adjustment here. Just to snug it down. And that looks good. So with the pencil marks that I made earlier indicating the starting and stopping points for my groove, I can place it up against the bit and kind of just eyeball where I need the piece to start and stop. Now it's not entirely critical that it stops right on the mark. In fact, I want it to go past a little bit so that this area will fully fit in instead of being rounded here. So I'll just mark off approximately where I need it to stop with my square on the fence, and then this way I know not to have the piece go past that point. Since I have two sides, two of these pieces will be cut identically, and I'll redo the setup for the remaining two framing members. So on this cut I have to be careful because I can't use this feather board or guard here, and I'm going to have to slowly pivot the piece down onto the bit and just let it plunge in, and then I can push forward until my stopping point. If you recall earlier, I said that we were using these lines here in the indexes on the side of the fence to help us gauge how far we were away from the bit, and that holding it parallel on both sides of the fence would help us to be able to push this, move this fence in for the correct amount. So I actually cut 2 pieces of scrap with the groove. So we're going to go ahead and set the fence out so we cut the correct amount off. So let's move this in. These are in 2mm increments. So since a 3/8 inch bit is about 8mm, 9mm. This will get a feet on course. Let's lock that in place, and I'll cut the scrap. I'm going to test this real quick and see how the fit is at this point. It looks like we're just a hair off, so I just need to move the fence out just a little bit more. So one more test fit after making that last pass. And it fits in there perfectly. So now we're ready to actually cut our stock. And we'll go through the same process as before, not just this time just with the fence backed out a little bit more.